Check. 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 Check.
and welcome to the regular school board meeting for Independent School District 833. It is Thursday, August 15th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. and we are in the District Service Center in Cottage Grove. 1.0 is roll call.
Pat Driscoll.
Present.
Heather Hirsch.
Present.
Michelle Whitty.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Ron Kath.
Here.
Tracy Burnett.
Here. 2.0, please rise and join me for Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
3.0 is the approval of our agenda, and we are going to add our closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations. So I will entertain a motion with that amendment.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Sharon, second by Katie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 4.0 are district highlights. They will be on our agenda in on August 29th. Public comment will also be an agenda item for August 29th. 6.0 are consent items. All consent items are considered routine and non-controversial by the school board and will be approved by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items, but prior to the meeting, board members did have the opportunity to review them and could have requested that one be moved to an action item for individual consideration. And since that did not happen this evening, I will entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Sharon, second by Katie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 7.0 are workshop items. 7.1 is program evaluation, and our Director of Continuous Improvement and Assessment, Brian Booth, will present this item.
Good evening. I'm excited because
all right. Is that any better? That'll work? Okay. Well, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about program evaluation and a system we're using in our school district called Qualtrics. And so I'm excited to share a little bit about the work that's been done this year in partnership with a few other departments, and kind of looking forward to what is going to take place in the future. And so we're going to start by talking about program evaluation. If you'll note, there's a little bit of a title change for me. I've worked in the district now for 6.5 years, and I've been involved in the professional development side for that entire 6.5 years. I'm very proud of the work that we've had the opportunity to do over those years, and now transitioning into sole focus on the research, evaluation, and assessment. And within that, there is program evaluation, which is a process that forces a school district or a company to look inward and ask the question, what are we doing well, what's working for us, and what's not working for us? Looking at efficiencies. Oftentimes in the business world, they'll talk about ROI, return on investment. For us, we might have a different lens to look at because it's not necessarily dollars that we're talking about. It's student achievement or student perception, staff engagement as well. And so tonight we're going to look at program evaluation through the lens of staff, climate and culture, and employee engagement. And so in order to measure that, we asked kind of the question as I was working with Kelly and with Keith and Julie to kind of to determine what's next for this new role that I'll be in. We started connecting with other school districts in the area, asking about how they perform program evaluation and what tools they might use. St. Paul School District uses a company called Qualtrics, and so we reached out to Qualtrics and started to learn more about them. It is the leading organization, leading company in the world on how to combine O data, all of the purchases and all of the numbers that you might be involved with in a business, and the X data, so that's like the experience of the customer. And they can merge together the X and the O data to try to tell you trends and patterns that might help you become more efficient. Some of the types of companies, for example, that use Qualtrics are companies like BMW. Zillow uses it to measure their employee engagement and satisfaction, an entire life cycle of what an employee would go through. Xerox uses it to measure brand performance. Pandora uses it to measure how successful their product is launched. And so companies around the world are engaged in this. StubHub, the NBA, some of the leading organizations in the world. And so if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for a school district. Madison School District in Wisconsin uses it as well, among hundreds of districts across the country. And so we engaged in a conversation with Qualtrics about how we might be able to use it in our system. And so basically at the end of the day, what it allows us to do is conduct surveys, but then also merge that data together with other factors so that we can try to understand the patterns and the systems that are taking place within our school district. One of the major projects that we wanted to work on was from our strategic plan. Kevin has been instrumental in leading the staff climate and culture objective within our strategic plan. And one of the measures set forth last school year was on employee engagement. We first set a goal of engaging our staff in training on climate and culture and or work-life balance. And then there was a measurement that we wanted to see how engaged our employees are in that work and in work in general, and set a target of 75% of our employees participating in a survey would report positively on engagement. And so working with Kevin and working with Qualtrics, we sat down to try to figure out what types of questions we would want to ask. And I just want to publicly thank Kevin for the work on that. We took many of the recommendations from Qualtrics. Kevin was instrumental in kind of saying, you know what, from an HR perspective, these are the things that we really want to know, in particular, our focus on equity and diversity, and making sure that questions like that were included in our survey so that way we could measure more than just employee engagement. And so it was an excellent opportunity to collaborate across departments. I'll also have you know, not having an expertise at all in HR, that my job here was simply to be a conduit so that Kevin could get access to that data, and from there, working with leaders across the system, they're the ones who would make those decisions. And so my role here in this was simply the person that might be a filter to help Kevin and his team generate those questions and then possibly start to sift through some of that data and help to make sense of it. And so that's kind of the first major project that we engaged in our district. And so in working with the company Qualtrics, we tried to identify what are the major categories that make up an engaged employee. And there are 10 key factors that make an engaged employee. And then there are a few extra additional factors that I'll just address and just quickly kind of go through them. Autonomy and empowerment. When you empower your employees, they tend to be more engaged and more enjoy their jobs more. Opportunities for advancement on their career, to collaborate with others within that system, communication through, and then company leadership, of course, is an important factor. Recognition, the resources they need in order to do their jobs effectively, strategy alignment to a company mission or vision, supportive management, whether or not the managers, their leaders. Oh, did I go too far? Yep, supportive management's there. Whether or not their leaders support their teams, training and development, what opportunities they have for growth. Those are the kind of the top 10. And then there are some extra ones that we wanted to analyze as well, such as customer focus, how keyed in they are on their customers, diversity and inclusion. Pay and benefits certainly are a factor when you're measuring employee engagement. Quality of product and service, what are they making, what are they selling? The safety of employees, social responsibility, kind of a particular mission. This is a growing trend as well. And then finally, work-life balance. Now, why do all these factors matter? What happens when you have an engaged workforce versus a disengaged workforce? Well, an engaged workforce, statistics will show an engaged employee will stay at the company longer, less likely to leave. So you're going to have higher retention rates. They tend to be more productive. They tend to be more creative. The workplace tends to be a healthier environment, so their own personal health tends to be better. The workplace tends to be safer. There are less accidents when you have an engaged workforce because they're more conscious of the work that they're doing. And so employee engagement is something that many companies around the world are interested in trying to study and analyze, and so we had the opportunity to have access to Qualtrics to help us evaluate our own system and where we're at currently. So in working with Kevin, we generated a 25-question survey, and we measured many of the categories that we just listed on employee engagement. Employees had the opportunity to answer in a 5-point scale. They could click strongly agree, agree, neither agree or disagree, disagree, and then strongly disagree. And then we took those results from our survey, and as I'll show, we compared our results to Gallup polls from across the country to see how does the South Washington County School District compare to the national average on some of the key questions. So our engagement goal was to have 75%. As you can see, our results were at 83% engaged employees, which is reason to celebrate. Our school district, we are fortunate to have a large workforce that cares deeply about the work they do. I should share that the national average on clicking strongly agree on the engagement questions is 34%, and we were about 45. And so for our school district to have a high level of employee groups that care deeply about their work, that is a great benefit and reason for us to celebrate. And so that's kind of the headline from this. If there's one thing you can take away from this, is that our staff loves what they do. When we say measure engagement, by the way, in particular, we're talking about questions like the work I do is meaningful. I generally enjoy going to work. I feel proud to tell people where I work. So you think about that question when you go home. Are you proud to say you're a South Washington County School District employee? That's a great question that our staff feels positive about. What's great about the Qualtrics system, and when we talk about program evaluation, is that we have 2,700 employees. And about 950 of them responded to the survey, so about 1 out of every 3 employees filled it out. But we can also start to look at that by employee groups. So for example, I can start to break down the data when I'm meeting with a particular school, and I can see how our engagement scores might rank from one school to another and have that conversation with the principal. I might be able to look at employee groupings and say, how are, for example, our elementary teachers, what's their engagement score? What about our paraprofessionals? I'll let you know, by the way, just in case you're curious, our paraprofessionals had a 90% engagement rate. Very high. Our bus drivers, 89%. And so we can start to look at within each category of employee groups and start to notice some trends and patterns. So headline, we have an engaged workforce. There's our big takeaway. Now I apologize for the graininess of this, but I wanted to show you what it looks like on the dashboard side. So within Qualtrics, we don't just give the survey and then just get this beautiful dashboard. We have to work to create it. And so behind the scenes, working for, and I apologize to my other members of cabinet. They would walk by and see me staring at my computer screen for days on end, and sometimes very frustrated as I'm learning to use this system. It takes a long time to kind of put all together all of the data to try to make sense of it. And this is what it starts to look like as you use the system to help you break down employee groups or try to analyze trends. And so our highest scoring questions, this is one of the things that it helps to spit out, is that the work I do is meaningful. We had a 95% positive response rate. For our teaching staff, it was almost 100%. It was a 99, which is fantastic. That's a great measure for us to see how engaged and how happy and how our staff views their own personal work. My colleagues are committed to doing quality work. We were at 89%. We see each other. That's a positive response. So now how do we do compared to the national average? When we compare ourselves to Gallup polls, Gallup conducts national surveys on this type of stuff often. There are some patterns that start to emerge. Overall, we certainly have a workforce. This is the percentage of people clicking strongly agree to these key questions, and they are similar questions, almost word for word on some of them, to how we compare to the national average. So for example, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. 58% within the South Washington County School District compared to the 40% national average. And so we have supervisors who are going out of their way to make sure that people care and know that they care. There's compassion, there's empathy there. I have someone at work who encourages my development. We pushed and we asked people to grow. From a professional development standpoint, I was very happy to see that number. Like that's a little validating for the work that takes place. But then there are other areas that asked us, beg of us some follow-up questions. So for example, South Washington County Schools provides me with the tools to effectively do my job, 16%. We'll unpack that one a little bit more as we kind of start to go through some of the other data points. I'll stop here for just a moment and see if there are any thoughts or questions as we're first kind of just seeing the data.
Well, and for me, the bottom one, so if we're going to hopefully, have a discussion around that too. If the mission isn't being rectified or people don't envision it or feel it, then we've got a problem.
Yeah. An engaged workforce or an engaged employee would say that they are connected to that company's mission. They are connected to a company's vision of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. So we are certainly below the national average on that. What's great, and I just want to reiterate, my role here is to provide the data. I want to just, as much as this, I hate to say it, I'm not an expert in human resources and employee development or employee engagement, and so my job here is, from a program evaluation perspective, is to share those numbers and then work with leaders in the system who can certainly then start to make some educated decisions about the work going forward.
Is there a particular reason why we just, segregate? A lot of times, to me, when you look at them, you look at agree and strongly agree together, because you get, especially on a national poll, because you get like the Minnesotans who we don't ever want to say 1 or 5, and there's regional differences to how people answer. So I'm just curious about that comparison sometimes.
Well, I use this comparison because Gallup uses this particular data point on the strongly agree. On the other factors, you'll notice there's the kind of positive responses, negative responses, and then neutral. So just kind of the 3 options. And so I use this particular data point because it's published, verifiable data that we can then compare to say how are we doing.
So I know this isn't your role necessarily, but it's our role as the board and the cabinet to be thinking about. But as you were talking about what makes an engaged employee in a workforce, it mirrors what makes an engaged student. And so as we push ourselves to dig deeper in terms of the climate of our buildings and of our district, and mission and vision is the strongest area of school climate improvement that buildings should be focusing on. And so as they focus on that with students and families, the ripple effect of that and the participation by the staff should help to increase how connected and engaged staff feel to the organization itself. And so I think that the work we've been sort of laying the groundwork and starting over the past 2 years certainly will help us see improvements in this, because all of the things that make an engaged and connected student also make an engaged and connected employee.
Thank you for saying that. In fact, it reiterates some of the conversation we've been having. As I've taken some of this data, we've been working with principals and having a conversation about their school improvement plans. And I had a meeting with a group of principals yesterday, and one of the principals said, we have a student engagement goal, and it feels kind of almost wrong to have a staff engagement goal. Shouldn't we just have a student goal? And we unpacked that and had that conversation about how when we focus internally and we work with our staff members, that staff goal can help contribute to a positive student goal. And so I agree 100%. It's the type of thing that if you can align that work with each other.
I should also say there obviously is like workplace culture things that can have a big impact as well, and that would certainly be seated much more in sort of like the HR world and leadership development of our building leaders and things like that. But the work that we do around engagement and climate and connectedness is the same work with adults and kids. So
I'd also like to add, when you look at the 10 and the more, these are all management tasks pretty much. And I think our district, we're sitting And when you look at administration and management, we remain 48 of 48 in school districts in terms of commitment. So these are a lot of things, being, recognizing employees and buy-in and all the different things that managers do for people. So I think it's also worth, acknowledging that and looking at that. Again, the importance, we often discount in a school setting, the importance of managers and management, but this is part of the whole culture and that we're doing here. And it may be in some of those areas where we need more tools in administration to do the job, to help employees do their jobs. So I'd like to also be conscious that, this isn't, this is about everybody having the tools to also support their employees.
Okay, so with that, let's unpack that a little bit. There are the lowest scoring items, and so to Michelle's point, notice the blue would be the positive responses, gray would be the neutral, red is in the negative. And so for us, the lowest lowest response rate we had in the positive was, in the past 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good work at 45%. I feel appreciated in South Washington County Schools at 49%. I'm given the opportunity to be involved in decisions that affect me at 52%. South Washington County Schools provides me with the tools to effectively do my job, 58%. And I want to unpack that one because it's fascinating, because there's an additional question in the survey about that my supervisor gets me the tools I need to do my job when I ask. And we did very well on that question. So as I'm meeting with principals, there's a little bit of confusion. They say, well, they're saying that the South Washington County Schools doesn't provide me with the tools, but my supervisor helps me get them when I ask for them. And so there's kind of the discussion that are the principals or the supervisors not seen as a part of the district mechanism to help you get the things that you need? Why would you click no on this question but then say that your supervisor helps you? And so there's things to unpack, and it's different at each school. Each principal, as I've met with them, or department leader, they're looking at their data and seeing trends and trying to understand from their staff perspective. And they'll oftentimes say, well, I want to go back and ask my staff, why did they click this? Why did they say this in this particular survey? How does that match up with the reality of what I'm seeing? And so
that was what I was going to ask is, are we working with principals to effectively do focus groups, or are you working to do them together so in working with like Minnesota student survey data or school climate data with kids, people often ask like, well, why did a student respond this way? What were they thinking? I don't know, I just administered the test. So in order to find out what our employees were thinking when they responded this way, we actually can engage with them and ask them and give different opportunities to provide context to these scores. And at a building level, that certainly makes sense, or by a bargaining unit, it makes sense. And so giving employees voice to say why they felt that way, or how they're distinguishing between their supervisor versus South Washington County Public Schools as an entity, and sort of helping teams or the cabinet or the district or the board unpack sort of what are the distinguishable differences between that. And so I think you were going there.
Yeah, that's part of our next steps. It's part of the joy of this work when we talk about what program evaluation means. It's not necessarily just the numbers. The numbers are an important part of that. It is the action and the follow-up. It is the type of work where, and Mike referenced this in his strategic plan work, is that then for us to see, perhaps there's a way for us to identify the types of engagement strategies that are working at some of our schools and say, all right, let's ramp that type of work up. We see success. Our principals are noticing this. Our results are starting to show it. That's part of that evaluation process. To your specific question, absolutely. The follow-up for many principals has been, I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask. And in most cases, it's going to be in a small focus group, usually their school improvement plan team. And say, okay, let me show you this result, and I'm curious about why, and let's talk about that. Let's unpack it as a staff. And so it's been, I should share our engagement results for our employees, or our principal group, were incredibly high. We have some fantastic administrators who are very insightful and know their staff very well. So this is confirmation for many of them of what's working, and then an opportunity for reflection that they're taking, I think, quite serious. And so just to validate that. Now, within Qualtrics, my favorite feature of all this, and this is a very ugly chart from this perspective, but it looks really beautiful on a dashboard, let me tell you that, because it's interactive. And I didn't want to pull up an interactive one during the school board meeting for fear of doing it wrong, so I just gave you a screenshot instead. So what the data can do what Qualtrics can do is can help us correlate which questions align to help drive up our engagement score. And so it can take each question and correlate those responses to the questions about, I feel proud to tell people where I work, I generally look forward going to work, and can tell you which questions that correlated strongly that you did poorly on, and which questions correlated strongly that you did well on. And so as a district, what we would see on this chart, the top right quadrant, if there were any blue dots, would be the types of things that correlated strongly that we did very well, and you'll notice we didn't have any. The green dots are ones that we did well on but didn't correlate strong. The gray didn't correlate strongly, but we didn't do particularly well on. And then the reds are the types of things that you would want to address. And if you can make a dent in those questions and increase the positive response rate on those questions, you will drive your engagement scores higher. So there were 3 red dots as a system. The furthest one on the left was the I feel appreciated. I feel appreciated at South Washington County Schools. And universally, as I've met with principals, that conversation then starts to go, well, what does that mean? What does appreciation mean for a staff member? And each site might have a different, each school is going to have a different perspective on that. Each person oftentimes is going to have a different perspective on that. The second dot on reading from the left is I have the opportunity to be involved in decisions that affect me. An engaged employee feels some locus of control, some opportunity to have a voice. And then the third red dot is I'm happy with my current work-life balance. And so now that tends to be a result question, and there's not much you can do to control that particular one. But when we talk about opportunities to be involved in decisions and appreciation, keep in mind this survey was given in April when everybody's really happy. Everybody's very positive. A lot of testing going on. When we start to break it down by employee groups, an important finding that I wanted to share, when we look at our non-licensed staff, a red dot emerges on this chart that is worth discussing. And that is that different types of people with different backgrounds, such as ages, opinions, collaborate effectively. And that red dot became kind of large on the left for our non-licensed staff. There tends to be perhaps a feeling that they're maybe not as seen or have the opportunity to be involved in decisions and collaborate with other employee groups. That's kind of that. It's worth noting in terms of discussion. And has come up with multiple principals as we've looked at their data to talk about how are we ensuring that our custodians, how are we ensuring that the bus drivers that you work with, how are we making sure that our paraprofessionals are seen and heard and validated for their work and their experience in our system as well. So these are the questions that were address that I feel appreciated, current work-life balance, and opportunity to be involved in decisions. And so that was that chart. So our next steps, as we've kind of addressed already, is that right now, we've done just kind of a quick buzz cut and looking at the data. It's been a quick attempt for us to see what can we glean from the initial information points. We're going to continue to work with HR and Kevin's leadership to make sure that the information that we get and the types of questions we ask next for this upcoming school year align to our strategic plan and align to the hopes and dreams of what Kevin's team is looking for. But we're going to do it at the same time so we can have some comparison data. And then we're going to continue to use Qualtrics in the future for other types of surveys. For example, I've worked with Shelley and our communications team to do a survey before we launched the website for our parents to get kind of a baseline level of information about how people are consuming information from us as a school system, and then we'll be able to go back and do that again. I've worked with Michelle on a survey for her paraprofessionals that work in special education, and how they're thinking and feeling about work within our system and their needs. And so working with many departments across the system here to start to ask the questions, what are we doing well? What are we doing efficiently and effectively? What can we build off of? And what are the types of things that we would potentially need to stop doing as a part of that evaluation process? So.
And I would say we've just scratched the surface of what we can do with this. And so we're really excited about the different elements. And as you implement change, Kelly had brought in work with the concern-based adoption model, which is CBAM, is one of the only research-based change models. Using Qualtrics, you can actually implement that to address how are people doing with the change, to see if we're implementing with fidelity on anything as far as our curriculum work and things like that, our student voice and a way to pull our kids into what we're trying to do with our strategic plan. And then, as Brian said with the analysis, there is so much that it can do, and you can get bogged down in data, but this can clean it up for us, like the correlation. So it's in its infancy stages, but it has great potential.
I have less of a question, more of comments. One, I'm sad that you didn't call me while you were sitting in front of your computer, because as you know, this is what I get super geeked out about. This is like what I do all day long, so I get really excited about it. But I want to challenge us as a district leadership to not just ask our principals what we think our janitors or our custodians or our bus drivers need to feel recognized, but to also ask the bus drivers and the custodians and the paraprofessionals and the teachers what they would like to be recognized, because what may be our idea may not actually make them feel recognized. And so it is important to engage leadership in those conversations, but it's also important to engage the staff in those conversations so that we understand some of the unique differences between bargaining groups, between buildings, between so different ways. And that I know you can do with Qualtrics, but I'm not sure if there's already a template set up for. So as we think about how this evolves and this work happens, I think it's really important to not just theorize how people want to be connected with or engaged with, but to actually just ask them, because they're a fairly captive audience. But I'm super excited, and I look forward to way more presentations by you about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job, but I hope the other thing is that we've done a lot of work with recruitment of people of color. And I hope that you will do the survey climate and culture and see where those people, how they're engaged, and all of that. So I just was engaged in a workshop with the YWCA in Minneapolis and their diversity team. And they had a piece, and the new buzz is not just diversity, but it's and inclusion, but it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think we need to encompass that, because then you get a sense of belonging in the middle. Without all three of those, you don't have belonging.
I will share that Mr. James McGee in our district used the Qualtrics software as a part of the affinity group work this year to try to break down and try to understand from a data perspective and quite frankly a human perspective the experience of our staff of color. And so I know that this tool is available to that, and James certainly would be able to speak much more eloquently about the findings of that. But we share your passion for that, and I think the opportunities are right.
So the only other question I had is, we use something very similar at work for our engagement surveys, and they finally added comments, so you could actually kind of get an understanding of why people are, rating the way they're rating. Is that not something that we could do, or it's not?
We did. We asked follow-up questions. So, for example, if someone responded that they felt unsafe, we asked a follow-up question in an open text field: what specifically makes you feel unsafe? If they responded negatively to I don't have the resources to do my job, what specifically could we do to get you the tools that you need? And so the text responses were many. As I meet with leadership and talk to different employee groups, we often look at those comments and try to understand, okay, what's the follow-up? What were the exact words that our staff are feeling? And so yes.
Awesome. Yeah,
Did-
like I said, we had nothing. So it's just all this pondering. So gives you at least a little insight.
I was just going to ask if we just triggered the open-ended comments on like strongly disagree, or if we trigger them in other words,
If it's strongly disagree or disagree,
Okay.
it would trigger the follow-up question of the what specifically can we do if they were answering in the negative. Yeah. And we can set other triggers as well. And that's been, I think, my excitement for the following year is the other layers that we want to potentially add to this as we move forward. But you try not to get too far ahead because a 25-question survey is already pretty long. And so you talk about an engaged staff member. You don't want to disengage them with a 50-question survey.
and the potential for 25 open-ended responses is also a lot of data to code into theme and do something with.
I have to give Kevin credit for that. He reined me in quite a bit. I wanted to ask more, and he's, nope, we're going to stick with this, Brian. So
And maybe you said it, but do we offer this twice a year to kind of see, or is it just once a year?
right now it's just been once a year.
So I just wanted to add that right now it is once a year. As I learned more about Qualtrics too, I had my first official training with them this week. We can also do mini engagement surveys throughout an employee's life cycle all the time, and then do some more real-time changes if we need to based on the data that we receive. So.
Any other questions, comments? Awesome, thank you. Appreciate it. 8.0, information items. 8.1, first reading of several policies. Assistant Superintendent Mike Johnson.
Good evening, Chair Brunette, board members, Dr. Jacobus, and fellow cabinet colleagues. We have our yearly policy review with 10 policies. They've been reviewed and revised to reflect updates in statute, state statute, definition of terms, legal references, and cross-references. Sharon, Heather, and Michelle have reviewed them, made recommendations for board information and subsequent action. Current policies are located online. We've taken one of them, the review of Policy 506, which is a yearly, that's student discipline. That's part of a larger ongoing district effort this year. We've met with Dr. Jacobus, Heather Hirsch, Julie Nielsen, Christine Schaefer, and me, and like I said, that's going to be ongoing. So we've got 9 today to review for a first reading. We had done these last year, I believe, and they were approved November 1st. So there's not a lot of editing with this. I had gone through MSBA model language, but also consulted with some cabinet colleagues. For example, on 410 FMLA would be Kevin, Bob Berkowitz on technology, acceptable use, and safety, 524. On policy 616 would be Kelly and Brian. And then finally, Napoleon Genru for crisis management policy. What I'd like to do with this first is go over a couple where there have been some changes. 413, harassment and violence, it is not in your packet, but I'd like to let you know that the language on Minnesota Human Rights Act, I did not make that consistent into the form, so I need to place that into the form and make it parallel. So that will be reflected in the August 29th for the approval, hopefully. And then the second one was school district system accountability, and I shared this with both Kelly and Brian. We had one part where there was an introductory statement that MSBA had on there. It had been changed. It had been changed this past school year, but we didn't catch it before November 1st when we approved it. There was an introductory statement, and then there was a definition section, and then an MSBA ad near the very end, and then just a couple legal references. So with that, I'll take any questions on any policy, and then I'll go to them and start writing if you have some questions.
So any questions?
I have a couple.
You bet.
So on the 410, the family and medical leave, is that for all employees? I mean, do the bargaining units have things that supersede, thank you, these, or is this standard for for the state of Minnesota, and they're the bargaining units. Do some people bargain for more or different things? I'm just, not on FMLA. Okay, so that's a standard. Oh, you're supposed to use it. Yeah, okay.
They may bargain for the number of time, their days of time off, or reasons and those types of things, but Family Medical Leave Act is entirely different.
This is a whole, just about the act and the legal mess. Okay. Do you want us to ask questions about all policies now, Mike?
Anyone, I'm ready to
Okay.
take all of them, and I can go to that policy.
I just have one. Do you have anything more for that? So on 524, the technology use one, I know it's a big one. In section 13, I believe, in B, it says, it talks about, let's see, it basically says that parents are here and notify the students will be using district resources accounts to access the internet, and that the school district provides parents the access to request and writing alternative activities, not requiring internet access. And so I'm thinking about all of, with Schoology and all the things we have, can we do that? Like,
No,
have
that's-
the child not use the internet?
That's a great question. With Schoology and with our one-to-one access, that's an excellent question. And what I could do is I could enlist the help of Bob, Kelly. We could contact Trevor Helmers to see if there's any language on that, especially at the secondary level, what we dedicate to that. Occasionally, there may be a principal who gets a request for a certain assignment. Please don't let my child use this, or what have you. But we really need to explore that a bit further, and we can definitely do that within the next couple weeks when this comes up for approval.
With
Thank
that,
you.
I'm thinking of our new e-learning policy, which would require our students to be using the internet to access educational services, their teacher, things like that, in the event that we are using e-learning days for weather and things like that. So I'm curious also how that might, and these are all new things, so it may be that no one's had to figure that out yet.
But for those extended learning days, if we use them, we want to have some accommodations for kids. It's not going to be all or nothing, but that is something to look at. And even with this policy, that with personalizing and trying to work through, there may be ways we can do things, but it's going to be really difficult if it's an all or nothing. If there's concerns about never utilizing it, it makes it very difficult. So that's something we'll have to, how would we address that for kids, and what would be the reasoning, and how would we work through? But the extended learning days, I think we'll have some alternatives in place, so that should not be an issue. One, if people wouldn't have access for some reason, or they just absolutely wouldn't want it to take place, because we don't anticipate really that would be done with our elementary kids. Be more of our paper type assignments, reading and things. The secondary, we'll have to work through that.
And I think I know at secondary, they do have things. When my daughter had her concussion, she couldn't use an iPad, obviously, for like 6 months. And all of her stuff was, it was already there and ready and everything. So I think they have it for kids that don't, for one reason or another, or don't have the iPad. So I don't think it's necessarily something that they don't already have in place for those situations that happen.
That's a good point with the concussion piece, because you can't have any screen time during that, and with the increase of the time frame with kids healing. So
Yeah, it's just
good
sort
point.
of like, can a parent say, I don't
Yeah.
want my child using the internet?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like the telephone or
Right, yeah.
riding the school bus. I don't know. It's an interesting, it's a new day, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are there any others?
I will just say that it was 64 pages of things put together with notes and in very logical order and coding and all sorts. It made it very easy to review 64 pages. I can't imagine it was very easy to put those together, so thank you. But I did spend an evening reading 64 pages of policy, so it's fun, very fun.
Thank you. I'm just getting you guys warmed up. It's back to school.
Thank you. 8.2 is our negotiations update, and Sharon Van Leer will give us the update tonight.
Okay. The South Washington County Schools is committed to providing regular updates for the collective bargaining agreement negotiations with the United Teachers of South Washington County, UTSWC. The district and the UTSWC share a common interest, the success of all students, and we are committed to working together to reach an agreement that will benefit our students and those who contribute to their success. The negotiations committee members from District 833 and UTSWC met for the 9th time on August 14th, yesterday, 2019. Meetings continue to be positive and collaborative. During this negotiation session, UTSWC presented a counter proposal to the district's original financial package offer. Additionally, 2 tentative agreements were reached as UTSWC agreed to the district's proposed language regarding emergency closing and teacher protection and discipline. The district also agreed to add an additional position to Schedule C, extracurricular. The district then caucused and provided UTSWC with a financial package counter proposal that included withdrawing 2 of the district's proposal and a flexible workday option. The district looks forward to a response at the next session. The committee meets again on August 21st, 2019. An update on that meeting will be reported at the August 29th school board meeting. The district will also continue to provide regular updates as the negotiation discussions proceed. You can find information on our website at www.southwashco.org under the school board section.
So I realized I forgot to ask for public comments on our policies. So if there's anyone who wants to make a comment, we can accept them now. All right, thank you. 9.0 are discussion items. We don't have any this evening. 10.0 is our action items. 10.1 is the approval of policy 621, which is our homework policy. And Mike Johnson will take that one as well.
Good evening again. This policy is attached for review, information, and editing. The recommendation to develop 621 was an action step of our 17-18 strategic plan. This is a product of the work of the Superintendent's Advisory Council. This policy has been reviewed by select district staff and stakeholder groups over the past 2 years. Sharon, Heather, and Michelle have reviewed the policy, made recommendations in the past for board information and subsequent action. We had taken comments and questions at a first reading 1 month ago, and tonight we wish to gain approval this evening. Since our last meeting, we had a couple edits to this, as well as I could share some of the feedback when we took some questions from the board, getting that from high school principals, for example. First off, with the edits, homework should be considered a formative assessment, and switching that only classified in the formative component of the total academic grade. We wanted to make that consistent so it wouldn't be confusing at the end of the grading period. And then a couple instances in definitions for formative assessment and summative assessment generally, instead of weighted 0 to 20% or 0 or 80 to 100%. As a former principal, and we've talked to principals about this too, if let's say if there'd be something in dispute, if somebody was 78% summative, and then it would just be a very difficult procedure for principals to follow. But those were really the 2 edits that we made in the past month. And we did get some feedback from our high school principals regarding workload on teachers, workload on students. The nice thing about this, when we asked the high school principals, the burden on students in advanced courses could be substantial, and is there a process to communicate that concern to teachers? And all three of them, Jim Smokovich has been a principal for 21 years. Sarah Sorensen Wagner, this is her 6th year. Todd Herber, 6th year as a principal. They do this, they have these discussions they've shared every year as a principal, reminding teachers. For example, they have discussed this in department meetings and staff meetings. Sarah Sorensen Wagner mentioned at Woodbury at the AP, with the AP courses, sometimes they'll alleviate that burden on students by having some summer reading. Now, not real popular for students, but yet when you can do some of that work in the summertime, it alleviates some of that stress during the school year. That's just one thing that had come up. A second one, has this been discussed, how often? And it just seems like all three of them every year. And they're always, what they really like about it, though, is that their staff members are very amenable to when they notice the kids are a little bit stressed out, or they've got this, and then they've got this other course where there's a project. The kids and the students work together to alleviate that. But those were just, I guess, a couple of feedback, some of the feedback that we have gotten. When Jim was a principal up in Grand Rapids and they had an IB, they were an IB school, they went so far because it was a little bit of I guess it was more of a problem. Mondays, social studies was able to test. Tuesdays, math. So they went that far, but he said, we don't need to do that here. We have a pretty good understanding. And in the future, what they want to do is they want to see how this policy goes, and then, get some feedback from their staff, whether it's through Google or small groups, but they all felt that the small group discussion and getting some consensus that way really works a little bit better so that everybody's voice is heard. But ultimately, those are some of the comments that the three high school principals had made about the policy. They feel very supportive of it, and they feel that their staff would be as well.
So I will entertain a motion to approve policy 621.
So move.
All right, so moved by Pat and second by Sharon. Any questions or comments?
I just wanted to say, this might be a little place for Qualtrics too after, as a new policy, I think it'd be really good to revisit this and then next year with really good data. I feel like it's a good start and it's a good attempt, and it's, to me, very generous to students. But, people have to go to college, and I don't have the same feeling like, oh my gosh, homework is this horrible thing. I think the idea of defining homework and the value of homework, what is homework, what isn't homework, I think is extremely helpful so that people aren't like, go buy paper towels, that's your homework, or things like that. But I would hope that we'd really look hard at, are we getting to what the point is here? So
one example was given that one teacher, an AP teacher, had gone so far as to really limit the homework when they used to be pretty homework heavy. And what happened was there wasn't the difference in the grade or the final or the performance of the students. So that was just a signal for the teacher to do away with most of it, and to really worry about those 53 minutes that those kids are in the class and in front with the teacher. So that was just one example, but I think very supportive with the three principals, and I really appreciate the work that Dr. Jacobus had with the teams of teachers that had worked on this from multiple levels. After the board meeting last month, we brought this to the instructional directors too and talked about it. So I think a good team effort with this, and I think we'll be ready to go for the school year.
great, thanks.
Anyone else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
11.0, reports and comments. 11.1 is our superintendent's report.
Great. I have a few things to report, and I asked a few cabinet members to help me out as we get ready to start the school year. First thing, just to report out in public, we're very proud of our district, and our finance department received the Certificate of Excellence on Financial Reporting for the 12th straight year. This is in addition to receiving the Minnesota School Finance Award from the Department of Education. And since we were lucky enough to see Dan each month in the updates and sitting on the Citizens Finance Committee and having our auditors come in, they're always very complimentary about the way we function here as a school district, and with a budget that, with grants and everything, really is in excess of $280 million. It's really commendable how close we are with our projections and how wonderful they do with the reporting and tracking. So I just wanted to thank Dan and his staff in public. So thanks, Dan. And then as we get close to kicking off the new year, our district communications department put together a new promotional video that we can find now on our website under the Back to School page, as well as About Us section. And I'd like to take a moment to have you look at it. I think it's fast moving and gives a great focus on our strategic plan. I think they've done a great job, and it makes me want to get right into class tomorrow. But I just mentioned the 18,400. As of today, we're 18,800 and a little bit over. We've had just an uptick this summer in enrollment. At this time in August, we're farther ahead than ever before. We know that we still have kids in the system that won't return, and that'll adjust down a bit. But today, every time I walk past our enrollment window, there were folks waiting. So all of the housing that we've been seeing is really taking off. And so the next piece on reporting is I asked Dan if he would just give a quick update. As you all know, and just to have the public continue to know, we are moving into our long-range facility planning process to update our 10-year plan. And I asked Dan just to give us a quick summary of where we are and how that kicks off or has been kicked off.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if you noticed or not in the video, if we had a lot of space in those rooms that those kids were in. So the long-range facility planning process includes, as you know, you approved a guiding change document and approved the creation of a steering committee and also a long-range facility task force. So far, the steering committee has met 2 times to review the protocols and processes that will be used as we begin our long-range facilities work. The areas of focus will include reviewing and understanding the growth in the district and the need for adequate classroom space, and reviewing the needs assessments that were completed across the district that address changes in the delivery instruction. One example would be the need for adequate space for online learning to occur. Our Building and Grounds Director, Kwame Ayim, and the Assistant Director, Dan Hines, worked in conjunction with some contractors we have used over the years, construction managers, to assess the needs by interviewing every principal and talking to many administrators. And we've collected those needs, and we will see those come out as we go through the steering committee and the task force. And then also reviewing the needs assessment of addressing modifications to address structural deficiencies and aesthetic shortcomings, for example, bathrooms and special education spaces. One thing that I didn't introduce, and I probably should as we begin, is why are we doing this now? just a little history, back in 2015, we had 2 questions on the ballot that concerned our space issues, and one was to build a new middle school and to improve the spaces at the other middle schools. That one passed, and then we had one that would expand the 3 high schools by 500 at East Ridge, by 300 at Woodbury High School, and by 200 at Park High School. And then also fix up the bathrooms basically in the elementary school as well. That one did not pass. So just because it didn't pass didn't mean the needs weren't still there. So then we employed a demographic firm called Davis Demographics to project what's going to happen, or what we think will happen in enrollment over the next 10 years. That information has been disseminated to the steering committee, and on Tuesday, August 20th, the next Tuesday, Davis Demographics will present the information to the task force for the first time. We anticipate that it will show that we have a huge growth bubble going through, and that we'll have an increase in students over the next 10 years. But we'll give you more details as that comes out. As we know, the district continues to grow, and there will be a need for adequate spaces. So that's where we're at right now, and in Tuesday's meeting will be the task force, and that will include community members and those interested.
Great. And as Dan mentioned about the 2015, we started this process in 2013, the 10-year update. So in 2014, the projections we made, I'm very happy to say that will show that we were right in the projections of where we thought we'd be now and going forward, which is good for our community to know. As we look at what are we going to do about our space needs. Sometimes as you look at these growth projections and folks are concerned, is this accurate? And we had some questions back then. Well, now updating 5 years later and showing that where we thought we'd be, we're really, when we meld them together, very close, which is great. So it's an extensive, complex process, but I'm excited about that kicking off next week and working throughout the school year as we go forward. Then again, as we get started or getting close to the school year, we had new teachers come back this week. It was really exciting. That's always one of the most enjoyable mornings to meet our new folks and talk about a number of things. But I always think back to just starting out as a teacher and what my very first meetings and the excitement about anticipating your kids coming that first day. And so I asked Brian to talk a little bit about how that day looked and our first day with new folks.
Yeah, on Tuesday, we had 79 new staff members join us.
I worry about your wellness there, Brian.
They told me. No, go ahead.
There you go.
It's working.
Yeah.
Okay. You're setting me up for failure. It's okay. We had 79 new staff members join us for breakfast on Tuesday at River Oaks, and I just want to give a special thank you to River Oaks. Dennis Neitz helped to set us up with just a beautiful morning and great food, and then it's an awesome opportunity to partner with the UTSWC, who helps co-sponsor the breakfast, and so thank you, Marty. Keith had the opportunity to welcome staff and give them a positive message for the start of the year. Our principals, assistant principals, other systems leaders, and cabinet members were there as well. And then the staff, the new hires, stayed, and they had the opportunity to meet their induction mentor and learn about our mentoring process to make sure that they know that there is support for them going into the year. It is always difficult to come into a rather large system, so who can I call for help? Who do I get to go to when I have questions? And so they learned about their mentoring process, and then they had a chance to go to their school, get keys, meet the office coordinator, oftentimes have lunch with leadership at the school, and then they went to East Ridge High School for the remaining days of Probationary Teacher Academy, which just finished up today. It's a 3-day training, and so special thanks to James McGee, who helped organize all of that in his new role. He did fantastic, and Peggy Joswack, who also helped with all of that as well. And so, and then basically our entire teaching and learning team was involved in some way, shape, or form in Probationary Teacher Academy.
And it's interesting with all the hires, not as many first-year teachers there. Do you remember the number? Maybe 7, 8. It looked like at the room. So I say that it's always exciting to have the first-year folks because it's such a great time for them, and it's to welcome into the profession. But it also, we're able to attract and hire a lot of experienced folks from around the metro area, out from outside of the state. And so they're really high quality, great folks that'll be able to come in our experience. So it really feels like the school year started already after this week, because there's so much activity and so many different things happening. And next week, everyone's coming back to be prepared as we welcome kids right after Labor Day.
11.2 is school bed. Okay, we'll try that one more time. 11.2 is school board member reports. So, Pat, would you like to start? Okay. Heather?
Sure. I will just say I'm getting ready. Next week I get to learn how to go back to middle school, so I'm very excited about that. My daughter will be starting at Cottage Grove Mid this fall, and she goes to Camp 6 next week, and I get to go to Parent Camp 6, I guess. And I'm wondering, my daughter keeps asking what she has to pack, and I'm like, no, middle school is not sleepaway camp, although I wouldn't be opposed to that. So if we'd like to consider that, I would sign up for the pilot. So getting ready for back to school with my daughter, participating in the negotiations meeting over the summer, negotiation meetings over the summer, and then having some side conversations with Christine and Keith and others about the mental health work that we're doing and discipline and obviously school climate. So very excited, and yeah.
I wanted to thank all of my school board colleagues as well and the community for supporting the Joe Slavin Golf Tournament this summer too, and the work that builds into with our mental health. As people know, I am not running for school board again, which is very sad. But especially remembering Joe and all my great colleagues. But so I'm sort of like a parent of a senior now. Everything becomes nostalgic. Like I'll miss the little microphone.
You still have a couple more months.
Yeah, I still have a few more months. Yeah.
Send them home with you.
And those of you who have been around a while knew I was far more vocal before I got on the school board. So you never know where that hits. But anyway, I did want to say how much, again, it's an exciting time with, I think, my other colleagues running for re-election, which is exciting, and a candidate of 10, I think. So it's a great public service to be able to watch these kids go, and I look at thinking of our own kids, but watching the growth in our district, and you look at the profound amount of services that we provide is just such a privilege to continue to serve. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
No comment this time.
Let's see. I continue to serve on the negotiation team, which I just love being with all of you. And I think that's it. I'm not trying to do nothing else.
All right. And I will pass as well. So 12.0, future meeting dates. Thursday, August 29th is a regular board meeting, and September 12th is a regular board meeting. So 13.0, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3A for superintendent evaluation. And as added at the beginning of the meeting, pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations, we will not be taking any action when we come back. So I will entertain that motion. Ooh, that was like exactly. So moved by Katie, second by Sharon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Wait, we have one more.
I don't think she's coming.
I think she walked out.
Yeah, I think she walked out.
We have a quorum.
Oh, we have a quorum.
No,
Oh,
she's
she comes. Here
coming.
she is. Okay, good.
Did you forget too? Roll call this.
All right, so we're back, so I will take a motion to reconvene the meeting.
Second.
You guys are just like right on. All right, so moved by Katie, second by Sharon. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and with that, 14.0, 13.0, we are adjourned.
We'll let you approve everything.